So we've been talking a little bit about encapsulation. Encapsulation is this idea of data hiding. It's the idea that objects and classes each protect their own instance data. So we've seen this with our instance data variables. We make them private so that the employee class is in charge of managing that data. It doesn't allow outside classes to directly access it. But we also, so keeping information private is one way to support encapsulation. We also support encapsulation by letting each class be in charge of its own information. So here, I mean, this might sound like a silly example, but of course, we could take the name of the employee and the name of the other employee, and we could cast them to a character array. Or, I'm sorry, we could invoke to char array to get a character array, and then we could loop through that array and compare each character individually to see if the names are the same, right? We could write the code to do that. That would work. It would work the same as invoking this, as invoking name dot equals other name. But instead, we want to let the string class be in charge of determining what makes two strings equal. So the employee class gets to determine what makes two things equal, two employee objects equal, and the string class gets to determine what makes two strings equal. So this idea of encapsulation, it means keeping data private, but it also is related to a larger idea in object-oriented programming of letting each class be in charge of its own information and in charge of its own functionality. So let each class kind of do its job, right? Let strings figure out how they're equal, let employees figure out how they're equal, and let each class manage its own information and its own data, okay? So the main way we support the data hiding part of encapsulation is by keeping those instance data variables private and adding those public getters and setters with appropriate validity checks when necessary. This prevents an outside class, or what's sometimes called a client class, from coming in and manipulating variables and characteristics in ways that we don't want. Okay. And again, this kind of larger idea that's related to encapsulation is this idea of letting each class be in charge of their own functionality and their own information. And that's something we'll come back to again and again as we move along. So scrolling back up a minute here to the beginning, we've written our core components, our instance data, constructors, getters, headers, toString, and equals, and we've also tested them out a little bit. So now we can feel pretty confident that this class is working the way that we want it to work. So now we can go ahead and write probably the thing we care about the most, which is those class specific methods. So I want you to again pause the video and think about the functionality that you might associate with an employee class or employee objects. So you can think about this class maybe being used as part of a larger like human resources software system at a company. What might be some actions that you might want an employee object to take, or that you might want to take on an employee object? So pause the video for a minute and just kind of write a little sketch in your mind, or write on some scratch paper, a brief description of some functionality that might be associated with the employee class. Okay, so hopefully you've got some ideas. Now, just like with the instance data variables, there are a lot of things we could think about, and we're going to keep things kind of simple. So I'm going to write 3 methods to represent kind of functionality, and right now we're going to keep those methods very simple. They're just going to contain a simple printout. But you can think about how these actually might be implemented in a larger system. So the 3 functionalities that I'm going to include in my employee class are going to be pay, review, and benefits. So you can think about the idea that if you had some system dealing with employees, you want some way to pay them. You also want some way to do a review, like an annual review or a review by a supervisor or something like that. And you want some way to issue their benefits, health insurance or whatever they receive. So again, you might have lots of different functionality that you thought of, and certainly in a realistic setting, there would be a lot more functionality we would include. We're just going to include a couple specific things just to kind of represent that we're thinking about the functionality of how this class might be used. And for now, I'm just going to write a simple print line. So we're going to paying, and we'll just put the name. And let's say name is undergoing annual review. And for benefits, we'll just say issuing benefits to name. Okay. So again, you can think about a realistic pay method might actually run payroll for that employee, right? It might actually connect to the system that contains information about their salary and then their direct deposit, and it might actually make that transaction. So this could be really quite a complex method, right? Similar for review and issuing benefits as well. But we're just putting these little sort of print line placeholders in here to just represent that this is what the functionality might be for when this class is used in a larger way. Okay. And then, of course, we can test them by saying, employee O2, let's pay employee 2, and, issue benefits for employee 1, for example. And we should get those print lines. Okay. And so now we have sort of our complete class that we have both of our core components and we've also added in some class specific methods.